to the entertaining Talkin' Sports.
What is going on, football fans? Back at it with another New York Giants video, and what a day today was. The coaching search is finally over. Obviously, I'm going to have a lot of videos over the next couple of days digging deeper into Joe Judge. I have done a preview video on him in the past, but I'll talk about what I think he'll be as a head coach, what strengths I think he brings. I'm going to have a pros and cons video up tomorrow. I'll have a Q&A later tonight around 8:30, maybe 8:45 for about 2 to 2.5 hours, talking about Joe Judge, talking about the future of this organization, talking about maybe who his coaching staff will be. I'd like to get suggestions from you guys. I heard about Jason Garrett potentially coming in, but then I later read that it was for the head coaching position before they decided to hire Joe Judge, so he may not be a potential offensive coordinator. But one thing I'll say about this hire before I get into all of today and all the potential hires they could have brought in, I think that Joe Judge, the one thing they have to do is they have to bring in experienced guys to be the coordinators. I don't think you can take flyer. I think Wade Phillips might make sense if you could get him in here. I don't know if he'll take the job, but they need guys with NFL experience on both sides of the football, in my opinion, if you're going to bring in a guy with this limited experience of Joe Judge. And I think I was the only Giants YouTuber that I know of, at least, that made a preview on Joe Judge and went over his resume. And one thing I'll tell you, you go back and watch it. When I looked into his resume, I understood why the Giants brought him in. I was impressed with his resume. I really was, outside of the lack of experience. But he had a lot of things on his resume that drew me in. And I even said in that video, I don't think he'll be the New York Giants head coach because of the lack of experience. The Giants have never been that type of team to take a gamble on a head coach. You go back, you look at their history. I mean, most of those guys, Belichick, Parcells rather, was not much of a. All these guys were either on the Giants coaching staff, and they had previous head coaching experience. They've never, to my knowledge, in recent history, hired a head coach like this. McAdoo's the closest thing, I suppose, but he was with the New York Giants for 2 or 3 years before, and the offense had a lot of success with the Giants. This is a guy from outside the organization who's never even been a coordinator. This is a flyer. This is a guy with really high upside and a very low floor. So it's certainly a gamble. I'm not going to lie to you guys and tell you guys that it isn't. This guy may not be the savior of the New York Giants. This could be a complete fail. And if it is, Gettleman will lose his job. Another thing I'll say about this, I think a lot of people are going to point to Gettleman. And they're going to say, how could Gettleman make this hire? I don't necessarily know that Gettleman made this hire, first off. Gettleman was on record like a week ago, or even less than a week ago, whenever it was, when he talked to the media, and he said that he was not in favor of firing Pat Shurmur in so many words. If it was up to him, Pat Shurmur would still be here. So it's clear to me that ownership has a ton of say in who the New York Giants bring in and kick out. And I don't think this decision was up to Gettleman. Maybe he had some say, but at the end of the day, I think the owners had a lot of say in this decision. And I think Bill Belichick, from all the reports that have come out, had a lot to do with it. Bill Belichick supposedly gave this guy, Joe Judge, a ringing endorsement. And everything you've heard out of Bill Belichick's mouth, not just recently, but over the course of this year, has been nothing but great things about Joe Judge. He's a great leader. He relates to players, things like that. I think the Giants read into that, and I think Joe Judge probably interviewed very well. One thing I'll say about Judge when I looked into his resume, we'll start with his coaching tree. Former player with Mississippi State. Rumors came out that he was going to possibly go back there as a head coach as recently as yesterday or the day before obviously the Giants gave him the job. But former player, later went to coach with Nick Saban as a special teams coordinator, then went on with the Patriots for 6 years, I think, with Belichick as a special teams coordinator, and got now more of a role this year when he had to take over the wide receivers in addition to special teams. And some people look at special teams and they'll say, it's not that important. Like, this guy hasn't even been a quarterback's coach or a whatever. He's been a special teams coordinator. But Harbaugh was a special teams coordinator. He made a hell of a head coach, special teams coordinator for 8 years. Belichick was a special teams coordinator for like 6, 7, 8 years before he took the DC job for 4 years or so and then got a head coaching gig. But a lot of great head coaches start as special teams coordinators. And one thing I keep reading about special teams coordinators that's a big draw is they get experience on both sides of the football, offense and defense. And it's incredibly important. So that's one thing I will say. Don't laugh at that about Judge. That is good experience. There's no doubt about it. Would I prefer a coordinator or somebody with more experience than him? Yeah. I'll be the first to say I was in favor of Matt Rule. But I never thought Joe Judge was a horrible candidate like a lot of people may have thought. And I never thought of him as an afterthought. The New York Giants over the last 3 or 4 years, nothing should surprise you. And this is no different. A lot of people, listen, I'm victim to it. On draft night, I was upset. I showed it about Daniel Jones, and I'll be the first to say I reacted too quickly. And I think New York fans in general do that. You look at Kristaps Porzingis. Kristaps Porzingis was booed off the stage when the New York Knicks drafted him 4th overall. And I think this is very similar. I think people are judging Joe Judge before we really know what this guy has. And one thing I've stressed this entire offseason, and even in season, is if they stick with Pat Shurmur or if they go on to a new head coach, whatever it's going to be, New York fans have to show a lot more patience. You cannot keep flipping head coaches. You can't do it. And I know what's going to happen. New York Giants fans are going to put more and more and more pressure. And if Judge gets off to a bad start, they're going to put pressure on the New York Giants to move on yet again, get a new GM. Can't happen. Giants fans have to be patient with this coach. He's young. He's 38. We need to support him with a good foundation. He needs good coordinators, and I'm sure hopefully the New York Giants have a plan to do so. And hopefully he gets the job done. But I think we need to give him at least 3, 4, 5 years. Can't be another 2-year head coach. Can't do it. Can't do it. Why do you think we ended up with Joe Judge in the first place? Why do you think Ron Rivera didn't want to come here? Why do you think McCarthy preferred the Cowboys? Why do you think Rule wasn't dying to be a Giant, even though it was where he came from and he's a New York guy? Obviously, if the Giants supposedly would have met the money, he would have came to the Giants. But at the end of the day, can I really blame the Giants? He was trying to use his leverage and to get the Giants to pay more money. And obviously Carolina gave him a big contract, I think $63 million over 7 years, plus a $6 million buyout at Baylor. And as much as I like Rule, he was my number one choice. I didn't hide that. Great motivator, a guy that flipped 2 college programs. He still lacks experience. It's not like this guy's this tremendously experienced coach. Okay, he wasn't a coordinator in the pros. His only job in the pros was as an assistant before, doing great things in college. But we've seen a number of college coaches fail. So it's not like he was without risk. All these coaches had risk, especially when you look past McCarthy and Rivera. A lot of people point to Don Wink Martindale, and Don Wink Martindale has a lot of strengths. Okay, great defensive coordinator these last few years. Had the number 1 defense last year, number 3 this year. Ravens well on their way to potentially winning a Super Bowl. And Don Wink Martindale deserves a lot of credit for that. But why doesn't anybody question why this guy's been a coordinator or linebackers coach for like 30 years and he's never been given a head coaching job? There's got to be a reason for that. All of these coaches have flaws. Eric Bieniemy, a guy I like, a guy that crosses his T's, dots his I's, very diligent from everything you read. Former running back coach. I thought he fit well with this offense with Saquon Barkley, right? Offensive coordinator for the Chiefs. But where's the negative there? The guy doesn't call the plays. So you have no experience really as him. He's basically an offensive coordinator assistant. He's never called the plays in Kansas City. So who really deserves the credit there? You have to at least question. Maybe Andy Reid has a lot more to do with it than a Bieniemy. I mean, after all, Andy Reid always has great offenses before and probably after Eric Bieniemy will be there. So, all of them had flaws. All of them. Josh McDaniels failed horribly with the Denver Broncos when he got a head coaching opportunity. Horribly. Didn't even make it 2 years. And then last year he pulled out of the Colts job. All these guys had flaws. All of them were going to be a gamble. And that's what happens when you're a team like the Giants. You're not going to get the pick of the litter. Yes, obviously, historically, we have a great history. But when you go through 2 head coaches in 3 years, what do you expect? Do you think coaches are going to come knocking down your door when you've won 9 games in 2 years and you just fired a head coach after 2 years when he was given a rookie quarterback and a rookie defense and didn't have a great opportunity to thrive with the New York Giants? He was set up for failure. He was a bad head coach. I won't stick up for him, but he was not given the right situation to succeed, and he was run out of town. If I'm a head coach, I don't blame guys for not, wanting to die to come to the New York Giants right now. And I think that's part of what happened. I also think what happened is the New York Giants saw a guy who's incredibly intelligent, who's incredibly driven. You're talking about a guy who has enough money to live. He's set, right? He's making millions of dollars as a coach in the NFL. And now, obviously, that he'll be a head coach. He's definitely going to make enough money. You're talking about a guy who's a special teams coordinator. He's a wide receiver coach on the same team and in the same year. In addition to that, he's completing his doctorate degree to be a guy in education. The guy's incredibly driven. He's incredibly smart, and he's a guy that can lead a football team. I do not question the brains of Joe Judge. I think that's there, and I think that's what drew the New York Giants. Now he needs the staff around him. He needs the support. But most importantly, New York Giants fans need to give this guy a chance. I would have said that about whoever we hired. You can't say the guy is a horrible hire before you even see him coach the football team. See what his plan is. See what he gets in place. See who the coordinators are. And don't judge him after 1 year. It's not fair. The guy's 38 years old. He's never been a head coach. You got to give this guy some time to thrive with the New York Giants. And if you don't, it's just going to be a repeating cycle. Hopefully he's the right guy. That's all I can say. I cannot tell you that he is, but I also can't tell you that he's not. We don't know what we got yet. We got to find out. Obviously, Judge is not the sexiest of hires. He's a guy that was not near the top of the list of anybody's, potential coaching hires for the New York Giants or anybody else. To my knowledge, I believe the New York Giants were the only team that interviewed this guy, but they interviewed him for good reason. I think that they got word from Bill Belichick that you need to give this guy a look, and they did, and when they did, they were impressed. And like I even said throughout this entire coaching search, don't be surprised if any of these guys are hired. As a matter of fact, in the video I did today about Matt Rule, I specifically said at the end of it, because I went back and looked, don't be surprised if they hire Joe Judge. This guy, if he interviewed well and he impressed them, he might get the gig. And I know a lot of New York Giants fans are going to be down on this. I know a lot of New York Giants fans are going to hit the thumbs down as soon as they hear me say anything positive about this guy. And I'm not going to tell you anything positive about him yet, but I'm also not going to tell you anything negative. I got to see what we got. I see potential. But, will that potential be reached? I don't know. There's been a number of head coaches where they've had great potential and they failed miserably. And there's also been a lot of coaches who went in with low expectations. You didn't know what you were going to get. Mike Tomlin didn't have the highest of expectations when they hired him. He was a guy with not, this unbelievable resume. There's a number of coaches you could point to. Harbaugh, like I said, was a special teams coordinator for 8 years. So you never know where it's going to come from. And sometimes college coaches succeed, sometimes they fail. Sometimes retreads succeed, sometimes they fail. And sometimes you find a special teams coordinator that is a diamond in the rough. And that's what the New York Giants are hoping for. But one thing I'll say, I'll give the Giants credit for, they did their due diligence here. They brought in every coach under the sun, and they made sure they got their guy. And now they'll be judged on that. No pun intended. We'll have to see how it plays out, guys. But Joe Judge is the New York Giants head coach. I'll have a video on, I'll have a live stream tonight talking about it, answering you guys' questions. Looking forward to it. And I'll have a pro and cons video on him tomorrow, along with some videos talking about who I think could be some potential candidates for the offensive and defensive coordinators as some news comes out. But as always, guys, thank you for watching. If you liked what you watched, please subscribe. Drop a comment. Maybe give me a little thumbs up. Cheers.